Welcome to another fantastic podcast. How do I know it's going to be fantastic? Because our guest is a fantastic human being. Here I am with Rabbi Chaim Shaul Bruk, Shliach Rabbi from Montana, Bozeman, Montana. And here we are. I got to say, I have to thank you so very much because you're literally just a touch and go. You're visiting New York. We're here in New York City by the OL, the resting place of the Lubavitch Rebbe. And we were speaking a few weeks ago and you're like, all right, Mayor, next time I'm in town, I'm going to be here for like 24 hours. So we came out here to meet you here and thank you for taking the time to do this podcast with me.
Pleasure. 18 hours in New York, but for you, who wouldn't give a few hours?
Wow. Legend. Thank you so much. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this time. I don't know if we actually ever formally met, but your story precedes you and what you're all about. So it's a really honor to be sitting here with you.
It's my pleasure. Your reputation precedes you, and I'm doing this mostly for my kids. If I'm going to Mayor K, there's a Mayor K, of course. So here I am.
All right, finally. So
that's right. There's definitely perks in being popular.
There you go. The music videos are starting to pay off in dividends.
Absolutely.
All right. Wow, that's amazing. So, but like I mentioned, Bozeman, Montana. Like that's
God's country.
God's, as they say.
No, I don't want to mess with the Holy Land, the Promised Land, but if there was a second best to the Holy Land, definitely Montana. When I first came to Montana years ago, someone said to me, he says, Rabbi, God used to be in the bigger cities and he got sick of the congestion and the pollution. So he moved out west and he hangs out in Montana. And I laughed when he said that to me, but I think in some level it might be true, but we can talk about that later. But I do think it's God's country.
Well, you grew up in New York.
I grew up in Crown Heights in the hood.
In the hood. And so for you, was it a massive change of like from this crazy hustle, bustle, living in each other's space, and like now you have like what acres of land between you and your next neighbor?
I'll fast forward. In other words, I coming to New York now is somewhat hard for me. I love coming to the OL. I love the spirituality. I love the kosher restaurants. But the traffic and the lifestyle ain't my cup of tea anymore. But going back to Montana, I grew up in the hood. We're just like any typical kid in the hood. You live with all the New York style stuff. And now my house is on 1.4 acres. My closest neighbor is not miles away, but there's definitely plenty of land. The kids have plenty of places to run around when it's not covered in 17 feet of snow. Mm-hmm. But the quality of life, the pace of life is very different. And once you get used to that, you don't want to go back to a big city.
Mm. What is one thing though you miss from the big city life?
I miss the energy a little bit. I love my New York energy. And I think in Bozeman, there's definitely a big segment that appreciates that New York energy.
You're still able to maintain it out there?
I am. Listen, I still don't have I don't have to utilize it as much as you do if you're in a big city. I don't meet with people 11 o'clock at night to have meetings. We get a good night's sleep and we have a more balanced day if you wish. But the energy, the focus of, not resting, just because you had a successful program 15 minutes ago doesn't mean that now you sit back and relax. We got to move on. We got to do something. We can't be bored.
Of course.
So that lack of needing or wanting boredom and that interest in constantly growing and having that energy, that's a gift that I got growing up here. Remember, my wife grew up in San Antonio, Texas. Her parents run a Chabad Center there. And so for her, moving to Montana was more natural, even though the weather between Texas and Montana is very different.
Very drastic.
I took her there to see it in Montana in the summer. I took her to see Montana.
So that's how you close the deal.
That's
you
right.
surprised me yourself by saying that you would 9 months of the year it's snow.
Correct.
I don't know, for some reason I always thought that Montana was just rolling green hills and it was just like
no, I don't know where you got that image from. We have beautiful rolling hills and green hills in the summer.
Right.
They're not such hills; they're kind of mountains. It's not the Catskill Mountains; it's real mountains.
It's real mountains, sure.
But yeah, we get snow starting from easily the beginning of September all the way until the end of May, maybe early June. There's been snowstorms even on the 4th of July.
Come on.
And we see snow all 12 months a year. So I see snow in the beginning of July on the mountaintops, and I see the same thing at the end of August. So there's very little time where it's actually no snow at all. But our spring going, especially into the summer, June, July, August, even September, are incredible months for those that are scared of the cold.
Wow.
But if you're scared of the cold, I do not recommend you hang out with us in midwinter. You can come in October, November.
Sure.
It won't be minus 20 yet, but in January, February, March,
Bitter.
And even to the Passover Seder, you don't want to be there unless you want to be within a foot of snow.
Oh my gosh! Wow. I'm sure the kids enjoy it. At times.
When it gets to May, they've had it, but they love skiing and they love going, there's a lot to do in the winter if you embrace the activities. It's all about your mentality and how you look at it.
Before we delve into kids, which is a big part of why I'm so interested in talking to you. But before that, for those who don't understand what it means to be a shliach, what you are doing with your life as a rabbi in Montana, what is the movement about and why Bozeman, Montana?
So I'm part of the Chabad movement, Chabad Lubavitch. It's 300-year-old part of the Hasidic movement, but particularly within the Hasidic movement, there's a lot of different types of Hasids. And if you live in New York, you get to get a better idea of those different flavors of Hasidim. But Chabad is very much focused on two primary issues: internalization, meaning not just superficial activity, not just superficiality and following a Hasidic master, a Rebbe, but actually internalizing character refinement, internal change, working on ourselves to be better people. And secondly is the idea of treating human beings with utmost dignity and love, which is something our society has never ceased to need and seems to always have a lack of. And so, with those two ideas in mind, you think of places that don't have established or structured Jewish communities, especially not traditional Orthodox Jewish communities. And my Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, whose ohel we're sitting quite close to,
right, his spot.
Correct, inspired me as a kid. I grew up in Crown Heights, like I said, 12 years living with the Rebbe until his passing in 94. And I was very much inspired, not just in theory, not just reading his books, but every time I'd walk into a Hasidic Farbrengen when the Rebbe was talking, this is what he was talking about. We got to go out there and change the world. Changing the world doesn't happen with bumper stickers, doesn't happen with Facebook memes. Those are cool things to have. You get a lot of shares. It's really cool, but that doesn't change the world. Changing the world happens with working with individuals at where they are and working with them to help them in their journey to become better human beings, to become more observant Jews, to become people that are also ambassadors of light. And so as a yeshiva student, as a rabbinical student, I spent 2 summers in Montana, the summer of 04 and 05, on behalf of Chabad World Headquarters. I actually went with my sister in the winter of 05, right before New Year's of 06. I said,
you were a single man then?
I was single and I couldn't find any yeshiva students that wanted to go in the winter to Montana. So I said to my sister, what are you doing for winter break? She said, nothing. I said, meet me in Montana. We're going to make Hanukkah parties.
Wow.
And so perhaps...
And why Montana? Because
I had spent 2 summers there and I said,
it.
Yeah, I loved it. And I knew the community at that point. I knew a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I said, let's go make Hanukkah parties. So we did 4 parties in Billings, Bozeman, Mezuzah, and Helena. And then a week later, I started dating what was to be my wife, Javi. I flew to San Antonio. We dated for a couple weeks. And we got married. So after we got married in March of 06, I said to Chavi, and we already spoke about it during our dating process that Montana was on the radar.
Right. So this is something you discussed with your wife beforehand. She knew that.
On our second date, I discussed that the Montana might be a possibility.
Would that have been, if she said that she was not into that, would that have been a big, a big game changer?
If she would have said she's not into Montana, I could have lived with that. But we knew before going into dates that doing what we do, this type of work, not just living for ourselves and our own spiritual well-being, but sharing that with the world was something we both wanted to do, which is already something that we had in common from day one. Montana, I waited until the second date before I brought it up because, listen, the reality is that even though now I'm so natural with Montana, in 2006, Montana was still it was a weird concept, because Chabad had been to many places. At that point, Utah was well established, even Boise, Idaho. But Boise, Idaho is a city of 500,000 people. Mm-hmm. Montana, the biggest city, which is Billings, is 100,000 people. Now it's 110,000. But the city that we were potentially looking at, Bozeman, was a city of 38,000 people. Wow, so the percentage of Jews is obviously much less. See, we can open a Chabad house for 38,000 people, and then the weather component and the remote, how remote it is definitely a component. You can't get there with a direct flight. There's very few flights, and it's living remotely, and that could be lonely.
Yes.
And so getting her on board was obviously vital, but she was on board with the idea. And then once we really locked it in when we spent the summer visiting a few weeks in the summer of 06, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's amazing. And arriving in Bozeman in Montana, did you have what were one of the most biggest challenges you had establish yourself in the community, and what kind of resistance did you have from the existing Jewish communities that took place? So
in Montana, before we arrived, at that time, it was a bit of a 100-year period where the only established Jewish communities were small Reformed Jewish congregations throughout the state, and the resistance was very minimal. They were very welcoming. It took them time, some of them, until realized that until they started considering us a threat. I still don't know why they consider us a threat.
Still today, really?
Yeah, because to many Jews, when there's another game in town, so to say, it's competition. I never saw it as competition. I saw it as, 2 opportunities to experience Judaism, and when we can work together, let's do that. But there were definitely those within the community that saw it as a threat. The majority did not. The majority are people that I get along with till this very day. Oh, okay. A lot of people go to both congregations. They'll go to a Hanukkah party here and a Hanukkah party there. But at the time, there was not a lot of resistance. Actually, they were entertaining hiring Chavi to run their Hebrew school. Again, in the initial stages, it never panned out, but that's the thought process. And so we had maybe a handful of families that were excited to see us coming. Majority weren't sure what to make of it. These Hasidic people, they're out of their mind. They're moving them. And that was really for both from
fish out of water,
from Crown Heights and from Montana. Both sides of the coin, they thought we were out of our mind. Montana, small place. What are you going to do there? How are you going to survive? And I remember standing at Kingston Avenue and Union Street with one of my best friends from my childhood. And he said to me, I mean, is it a place that you can ever have a minyan on Shabbos, like a prayer quorum where you're going to get a group together? And I said to him, and I still remember the conversation because I said to him, I said, Shloimeh, it's not about the minyan. It's about the 10 campaigns that the Rebbe instituted of how you reach out to people. Tefillin, mezuzahs, building a mikveh, which we did.
Wow.
And I said, that's a lifelong of work I have set aside. And today the proof is in the pudding that we have 3 Chabad houses in Montana as a result of that initial moment. And so we opened up a second one in Missoula with a wonderful couple. And now there's a third one in Kalispell in the Flathead Valley. And so Judaism is really flourishing in Montana. But that takes a moment where someone says, I see a future there. Let's go make it happen.
Wow, that's incredible. I know you're very passionate about the, initially at least, the Mezuzah campaign. Your goal was to have a Mezuzah on every single door of every single
Jewish doors.
Yeah. Right. Every Jewish door.
Every door I need 1 million mezuzahs.
There you go. So is that 1,300? And how's that campaign going? And what's the significance? Why from all the mitzvahs, all the commandments, why was the mezuzah so important for you to campaign about?
It has a lot of components to it. First of all, the mezuzah is an easy mitzvah to fulfill. Right? All you got to do is knock it on the door or double-sided tape. It's on the door. Sure. You fulfill the mitzvah. Now your house has a mezuzah. Secondly,
and it gets you through the door to the people's house.
Well, that's a lot of the people that are sort of uncomfortable with Chabad's activities use that as a tool.
I was thinking more as a positive way.
But they say, look, he's just using the mezuzah to get in the door. Okay. First of all, I would love for them to let me in the door. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
If you put a mezuzah on someone's door and they invite you in for a cup of tea or a glass of water, why not?
Sure.
But more importantly, I think that in an era that we live in, it's important to identify as a Jew. And a mezuzah is the greatest form of identification. You're living in rural America. Montana is the epitome of rural America. And you're putting a mezuzah, which means you're letting everyone else in the neighborhood know that this house has a Jew. Now, that doesn't mean everyone knows that a mezuzah means you're Jewish, but there's enough people that do, especially those that don't like us. They seem to always know that a mezuzah means that a Jew lives there.
But sorry to call you, but do you find resistance towards Judaism or Jewish people, anti-Semitism in Montana?
Very little.
Yeah,
very little. I mean, I've been walking around Montana permanently for almost 13 years and non-permanently for already 16 years. And I can't even recall one moment where I've ever been accosted or on the contrary. People, just yesterday in Walmart, literally, yesterday morning in Walmart, I was waiting at the checkout and a lady came up and said, "You're the one from the menorah. What do you call yourself?" I said, "A rabbi." She says, "Come, I'll check you out here at this aisle," which was great. So we get that all the time, and it's positive. A lot of it is, remember, anti-Semitism and ignorance is something that, sometimes cross paths. And we sometimes don't know how to differentiate the two. We get offended so easily because someone said something or asked something. They simply don't know.
Right.
It's an opportunity for education. Now, if someone's a diehard anti-Semite, we got to deal with them accordingly. But the majority of people, when they look at you with that look, they're not looking and saying, "Hey, there's the Jew." Right. They're looking and saying, "Hey, what in the world is that guy wearing on his head?"
Right.
And so what I do is I walk up to them right in the grocery and say, "Hey, you look a little, confused or uncertain. I want you to know I'm Jewish." Interesting. I remember in a gas station in Helena, Montana, I walked up to someone and he goes, "I've never met someone like your kind before." And I was like, "Fantastic. And I'm glad you did now. You know that I speak English. Yeah. I love jelly beans, Mike and Ike's. I drink the same garbage that they sell, and I'm a normal American who happens to be Jewish and loves being Jewish and identifies as being Jewish. And I think a mezuzah reflects that. And the response to the mezuzah campaign was incredible. My grandmother had passed away in Israel and one of our relatives said, "I want to give you $5,000 to start a mezuzah campaign."
Wow.
And the rest is history because it's now years later. The mezuzah campaign not only exists in Montana, but many Chabad rabbis and Rebbetzins have called us to try to emulate it in their communities, which I love. Mm-hmm. But we also get requests online from people all over the country. Can we send them a mezuzah? And when we get those requests, I'll send them a mezuzah for free. The first mezuzah on the front door is for free. But what I'll do as a courtesy, I'll always call the Chabad rabbi and say, "Hey, someone in your town wants a mezuzah. Would you like to take it or would you like me to send them one?" And most of the times they'll go for it. But I think we need to create that environment where people have that mezuzah on the door because it's an easy mitzvah to do. And why not make it easy? We don't have to make mitzvah. There's plenty of mitzvahs that are hard. There's no reason not to embrace the ones that are easy. And more importantly, let them identify. There's a woman that said she's a daughter of a Holocaust survivor. It took her 8 years of us back and forth in our community and being part of our family that she finally felt comfortable putting up a mezuzah, because to her, a mezuzah meant I'm outing myself to the whole community, and I don't want to do that. She was scared.
Right. That's amazing. Another great program that you have going on in Montana, which I love, is the Operation Dignity.
Project Dignity,
which I find amazing and fascinating, because what I've come to realize is that, and all the respect to it, that a lot of people in the Jewish community always like to extend themselves to the Jewish community first. Like, I want to take care of my own, and then if there's money or time,
as they should,
as they should, if that's
at least that's my perspective.
Okay, fair enough.
But it's not either or.
Well, but I find with you, and I don't really see that with many other types of rabbis, where they put efforts and time and money into a project that has no boundaries between race or creed or religion.
Absolutely, and I think I see that as a reflection of the way the Rebbe taught me. And again, I can do that in a place like Montana, perhaps a little easier, just because our population is much smaller. If I was in a big city, I would need a lot more funds to be able to do that. But when someone needs, just in a couple of examples, someone needed, a Jewish woman in the community, an elderly woman needed hearing aids. She couldn't afford it. I stood up in shul on Shabbos in the synagogue, and I said, guys, we have a member of our community that needs hearing aids. And within an hour, and it's not a wealthy community, we had to put together the money, the $2,500 that she needed for the hearing aids. But that's a Jewish woman. But there's a physical therapist in town who is Jewish, but said that one of her clients who isn't Jewish needed glasses, couldn't afford to get glasses, and her insurance wouldn't cover it. And I said, how much do they need for glasses already? It's like $150, $200. I said, we got it. Project Dignity's got it. The thing about Project Dignity that I love most is that it's really done with dignity. There's no way a donor can come to me, and they've tried, and say, Rabbi, where's the money going? I said, you have to have trust that I'm doing my job as a rabbi, as a leader in the community, to take care of those that are needy, those that are in need. And I'm going to do it with class, so they don't feel like they're beggars, because they aren't. Most of the time, the people that are in need are people that are having a tough moment. 2 weeks ago, a Jewish guy from Helena reached out and said, Rabbi, we're broke. We moved here with a job. The job doesn't exist anymore. And I said, do you get SNAP? Do you get food stamps? It goes, yeah, but food stamps doesn't cover toilet paper. And my cell phone bill is $40 and it's going to get disconnected. So I said, do you have PayPal? No PayPal. So now you're in Helena, but I need to get you the money right away. He says, there's Western Union 2 blocks away from my house. So I downloaded the app, and within an hour and a half or 2 hours, he had $150 so he can just get by and breathe. And I think that when you have a human dignity perspective, not just for the Jews. Listen, I think it's important we take care of our brothers and sisters first. That's always, because sometimes in the name of the greater good, we forget about our own. And that's also a terrible crime. Why are you taking care of the elephants in Africa when there's people in your own community that are starving? There's nothing wrong with it. It's important to take care of the elephants in Africa. But so we need to take care of our own, but never limit it. When someone's standing there and needs your help, it should never be limited to, like you said, race, creed, sexual orientation, any of that. It's about taking care of human beings.
Wow, that's amazing. I know for myself. I know for myself that's something that I'm passionate about is of course spreading kindness and doing good. And I opened up a nonprofit that helps those who are experiencing homelessness, and that covers people who are Jewish and who aren't Jewish.
Homelessness is I see it in Montana, especially. I know California has a big dilemma with homelessness. In Montana, it's less, because when you have 9 months of winter, you don't want to be homeless in Montana. Oof. But the reality is we have a warming center in Bozeman where they can go sleep at night.
Oh, wow.
So just to make sure they don't literally freeze to death in the street. But my kids, even when I don't have any I barely carry cash. My kids make me crazy that I have to help every homeless person. Not only that, I was once pulling out of the grocery and there was a homeless person that didn't have any cash. So when I was in the grocery 10 minutes later, my kid said to me, Chaya, she said to me, we should really buy them some food and go back and bring it.
Wow.
So here I am, I'm buying some non-kosher bakery goods and a latte, and I'm driving back to this other part of town, and I pulled up and I said, listen, you really got to thank my kid in the back, because if it was up to me, I would have went home. And that's the reality that, us adults, we like to help the world, but we also like our comfort zones. And if it means going out of our way, it's a little harder. Yeah. And I needed at that time, she was 7. I needed my 7-year-old to remind me that there's someone out there that's chilly and cold and probably hasn't had a meal in a while. Go out and help them. And so that concept of just being there for human beings, no matter who they are, is really something that I got from the Rebbe, because I saw the Rebbe dealt with all types of people.
Yes.
Jews, Gentiles, didn't matter. And I think if you live in a rural community like I do, I think it's inevitable. You have to. There's no other option.
Mm. I love it. To segue into, you mentioned how your 7-year-old at the time, Chaya, open your eyes and step out of your comfort zone.
Question.
And I'm sure she does that constantly till today. But
Kids in general do that pretty good.
They do. They sort of, they definitely have, I think just, a fresh look and an innocent way of just looking at the world where, as an adult through life,
Also, not only innocent, I think it's an incredibly kind way to look at the world.
Yeah.
I was walking in Yerushalayim once in Jerusalem, and there was a homeless person near Ben Yehuda. And Chaya, again, it was Chaya. She was even younger. And she said to me, why is this person sleeping on the street? She's never seen that in Montana.
Right. I
said, they don't have a house. So she said, why don't we get him a house? Oh. And I was like, I was stumped. What do you? I said, houses are really. I started stuttering. I couldn't. It's like, you're right, Chaya. We should not live in a world where a person has to sleep on the street. Now, of course, it's not. In reality, we can't buy everyone homes. I can't, certainly. I don't have the funds for it. But what does that say about our world? What does it say that Vietnam vets all over Montana are the ones that are struggling most? They fought for our country, and where are we? And so, I really feel like my kids have really taken my, innate perspective and really upped it to a whole different level of how we see the world.
Wow, that's very inspiring, and I think you're right. There is always those awesome, like those big moments when I go around trying fundraising for for those who are experiencing homelessness. A lot of resistance does come from like, oh, what's that going to do? What's my few dollars, or what's this party, or what's this event going to help? Someone who doesn't have a home or is in a homeless shelter. But I think it goes back to back to the basis of dignity, where we're trying to connect with a human being, build them back from the ground up. I know a lot of people who are on the streets who are homeless don't view themselves as a human being anymore.
I saw a meme going around a couple weeks ago that showed a picture of a guy, and the homeless guy's asking him for money, and out of his mind he's thinking, I should give him money. He's going to use it for drugs and alcohol. And then he drives up and says, hold on, what am I going to use it for? Same thing. So suddenly with the guy in the corner, we have excuses why not to give them money, because what are they going to use it for? My grandmother, Esther Goldman, was a Crown Heights matron. She was the epitome Crown Heights woman. And she'd go on the subway every day to work. And when I'd go with her to work, she worked at Deutsche Plastic, actually, for Muttel Deutsch in Manhattan.
Sure.
And she'd go on Spring Street. She'd get off everywhere. And we'd go on the train, on the 6th train, and the 4 train, the 6th train. And she'd always give $1 to any homeless guy that came in and asked. And I once asked her, I said, Bubby, the black people are not giving their own people the tzedakah, the charity. Why are you? She goes, I have to answer for what I do, not for what anyone else does. In other words, I have to be a kind individual. It's not relevant what anyone else does. And so I think part of being in Montana has taught me more than anything else is that I got to do the Rebbe's work. I got to do the work of spreading that love and light in a way that works for my community. And if that means walking over to a guy who's drunk out of his mind outside of the grocery and just putting your hand on his shoulder, like, you do way better than I do, and you have video cameras. I don't got videos, guys following me, but just showing them authentic love, because he's another one of God's creations. And if I can't see him that way, then why do I expect the whole world to see me as something valuable? If one human being is not valuable, then no human being is valuable, and the hell with everything.
Sure. Everybody, what is it? You being here is God's way of saying that you matter.
Correct. And if I don't see you that way, why should, we complain, for example, about how people see Jews. One of the ways to deal with that is start seeing other human beings as creations of God, the way the great sages of old used to. And somehow in the commercialization of society, we've been grouped into different groups. And groups are not a bad thing. We have to have our own identity. And as Jews, we have a healthy Jewish identity. But my healthy Jewish identity shouldn't affect negatively how I treat other human beings. On the contrary.
Absolutely not. Yeah. It's maybe an interesting way of bringing out the point, but I remember reading about how when the Jews were celebrating once they crossed the Red Sea, when God put the waters together on the Egyptians and they were drowning and they were... My handiwork is drowning and you guys are dancing and singing. Right.
And so I think that's in general a perspective. Certain things are necessities, like war is a necessity. But my kids ask me, why is there war? What am I going to tell them? That it's all holy wars? They're not all holy wars. They're not all wars that are based... You got to be honest with them that the world doesn't operate the way it should. It's not a messianic era yet, which we wait for. But in the interim, do our best to deflate a lot of that stuff that goes out. That's why, I took one of my daughters, Shoshana, she's doing a school project, and I took her to the local mosque in Bozeman. Wow. It's not like I don't recognize that we got a problem with Muslims. In other words, in the sense of how they teach their children to look at Jews. But that doesn't mean I can't, on a local level, have that interaction that can be healthy and see the commonalities. He was a Turkish Muslim. He the belief in one God, the way they pray, that all of that. We need to learn to do better with that. I'm a work in progress. Don't get me wrong. I'm far from perfect. I grew up in the hood. I need rehab for a long time. But until I get there, my kids are really training me to do better and better in that realm.
Totally. On the topic of kids and family, I want to transition to something which I find fascinating, and I think which is a stigma which you're breaking down and really showing up for.
We broke it. It's done.
It's done.
It's
shut
gone.
It down. It's gone. It's in the past. Got it.
The stereotype is over. The taboo is gone.
Fair enough. You and your wife, and God bless you both, have adopted to date 5 children.
Chavi would love the fact that you said to date, because she would love to keep it expanding it. So she's definitely on your team. I'm keeping it open.
Are you tapped at 5 right now? Are you?
It's not tapped. Our life is very, very busy with 5.
Okay.
Adoptive kids, and we'll talk about the adoption process in a moment. Adoptive kids, all children keep parents very, very busy. But adoptive kids have naturally issues that are challenging. There's some diagnosis like attachment issues because they know that they're adopted and they know that they're not with their biological parents. So there's mental health challenges, there's emotional challenges, and we deal with those challenges. We don't sweep it under the rug. We deal with it so it's a lot of work. But Chavi would definitely be open to filling up the house with as many kids as she can. I'm not going to bring you into all our internal debates or conversations about that, but she'd be very proud that you said to date.
I want to unpack a bunch of things that you just mentioned, but I mean, before jumping into that, could you take me back to that time? Because within our culture, with our community, getting married, having children, and having a lot of children is a very big part of our being, of our identity, of what it means to be successful.
And I want to debunk a myth, if you wish. It's not about. I don't think most people. I can't speak for everyone, but I don't. From what I understand and from what I interact with a lot of people, I don't think it's about a success story, right? I don't think people see it as a success story. Oh, I have X amount of kids. I think we truly, on some level, maybe not every day when the kids are making you crazy, but on a deeper level where it actually matters, we see kids as a blessing. And every kid that comes into our family is a blessing. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we want to have as many of these blessings as possible. Thank God, I have this beautiful uncle and aunt in Crown Heights who have 15 children. No twins. No twins. They're all...
That's amazing.
So same husband.
Same wife.
In Montana, I tell them it's the same husband, same wife. It's not a mixed family, step kid. No, they're all 15. And it's incredible to be able to see that as a blessing. I could see why people freak out about it because I have 5 and I don't know how anyone does it. But when I had 1, I said, I don't know how anyone could do 2. When I had 2, I swore you could never do more than 2. And here I am with 5 and somehow I'm surviving. Not only surviving, but thriving. But we got married and like every other Orthodox Jewish couple, the next thing on the agenda was to start popping out babies.
Sure.
And Hashem, God had different plans. We went through the infertility journey, which was an incredibly... it was a rewarding journey because there's incredible people like in the organization Bnei Olam, my dear friend who became a dear friend during that era, Rabbi Shlomo Bachner, who's the CEO of Bnei Olam,
great
guy you should interview someday.
Great man.
Incredible man.
I met him once or twice. And
a Baba V'Chassid, that's an incredible human being. He took us through that journey. And the end of the journey was about a year into the infertility treatment or a little less than that. We were at one of the hospitals, big hospitals here in New York. And the doctor came in and said, and I quote, "You're not going to be having biological children. You probably should look into adoption." Now, I'm 26 years old. Chavi, I think, was 23 or 22 at the time. And your whole world is shattered. It's not figurative. It's not, oh, well, let's try another option. In the secular world, you try, some people take it obviously different than others, but as a general rule, we tried that route. We're going to go the other route now. Who ever heard of adoption growing up in Crown Heights?
What's the other route? Just out of
adoption.
Oh, adoption. Okay.
You go through IVF, you do all the infertility treatment. There's all these. There's TESI treatment. There's IVF treatment.
What about surrogate mothers?
So in the secular world, that's definitely more common. How that relates to Jewish law is a little bit more complex. It's not so simple. But we got that news, and you're barely recovering from the medical procedures, and you're lumped with the news, and no one in Montana knows what's going on. So you're in this little bubble. All your siblings are having babies. There's strollers, and there's all this big visual mess going on in your head, and your world is literally falling apart. And you have to try to make believe on the outside that you're still functioning when you're really not. Mm. And there's this young couple who barely know each other. You're married for 1.5 years, 2 years. I mean, you don't barely know each other, but it's new.
Yeah.
And now your whole life has changed, and the trajectory of your life has changed. And you don't know where to go. And I'll never forget those moments outside the hospital when, we were leaving the hospital with this news. I had two siblings in the back seat, two of my siblings who were silent. They didn't know what to say. My father, who's a Israeli / with Russian parents, he's in the driver's seat and says, "Was wissen the doctor? What in the hell do the doctors know?" Okay. I'm like, okay, sure, miracles,
Yeah, right.
And then my father-in-law, who's a composed Chabad rabbi from Texas, who calls his oldest daughter, Chavi's the oldest of 9, who just found out that biologically, at least the way medical developments stand at that time, is not going to have children. And he says to us on the phone, there must be children out there that God wants you to raise. And he planted a seed. I mean, we weren't in a place to even thinking of internalizing that, but it definitely planted a seed. And before we left back to Montana 2 weeks later, we went to visit Shlomo Buchner, who himself adopted a child. He doesn't have biological children, Shlomo.
Right.
And he gave us a little bit of an idea of what that entails, but it was all new. It was a mess in our head. And it took months and months to really digest that route. And then you find out after all that now you're finally ready to adopt, and you find out that the route of adoption is incredibly hard. It's not what you think it's going to be. Oh, we'll just go over to the adoption agency. Oh, yes, sure. You always have these credible stories, videos you see on, on Good Morning America.
Sure, right.
But in reality, it's an incredible journey that cost a fortune. But we were ready. We were going to go down that route, but we had no idea what to do. Wow. And there was so much stuff mixed into it.
What's that process look like when it comes to?
You got to get a home study, which is social services comes to your house to assess, are you a good parent?
Yeah.
And
how do they know that you're not putting on a show when they come?
Because they do this for long enough to know. There's limited amounts you can do. They don't tell you they're going to open your refrigerator and then they open it up to see if there's actually food in the house. They don't tell you that they're going to need you to have a fire extinguisher, and then they look to see if you have a fire extinguisher. They know what they're doing for the most part. In our Montana, there's no Jewish family services, so we had Catholic social services doing our home studies. They were incredible people. There was a guy, Sam, who took us through 4 of our 5 adoptions. Incredible guy who really learned a lot about Judaism in the process, and really we became good friends. And so they do the home study, and then you start networking. Where are you going to find the baby? And do you want a Jewish baby? Do you want a baby that isn't Jewish, that's going to convert to Judaism? And what's that process like? Are you okay with a non-white baby, a non-Caucasian baby, a black baby, a Hispanic baby, a mixed baby, an Asian baby? There's all these things that you got to deal with. And you have to have a lot of open couples. The one thing we learned really quickly. Did
you go to therapy for that? Did you have someone guiding you through this process?
We had people guiding us. We probably should have started therapy earlier than we did, but we definitely involved therapists who are incredible. I highly recommend finding a good therapist who knows this world. But the most incredible thing that you learn is that either you're a couple doing this together or you're going to end up in divorce court. Because the reality is that taking on that kind of reality of adopting is a new world. And it's a world that has incredible challenges. And if you're not doing it as a team, it's going to rip you guys apart. And so Chavi and I, in an incredible way, we joined this journey together. And I think that's one of the unique things about our relationship and our marriage, not only in the private, but even in the community, is that we've been through so much together that it's like, nothing really phases us anymore. It's just a question like, okay, what does God have up his sleeve this week? Oh, throw this at us. Let's see what the Brooks can do with this one. I feel like God sits around and says, the Brooks haven't had something in a while that's really wild. Let's throw something at them and see what they'll do with this one. Who's he going to give the challenge to? The one that failed the first time? Let's give it to the one that dealt with it and came through on the other side.
Wow.
And so we adopted our first child in 2009, Chaya, who was born in Russia as a preemie with a lot of medical issues. And Baruch Hashem, in a miraculous way, her medical issues have, all turned out okay. But we adopted her when she was about 2 months after she was born, but she was only 7 pounds when we adopted her because she was born as a preemie.
Sure.
And she was our first. And the moment you make that minute you hold your baby in your arms for the first time, it's literally like a gift from Hashem, a gift from God, that those years and months of pain and agony and internal turmoil disappear. Wow. It literally disappears. The moment you say to yourself, adoption, it's not the same. You're right. It's not the same. An adoptive child does not have the same bond with their parent like a biological child does. But the bond that's created is unmatched. There's nothing like it in the world because it takes a lot more work.
Totally. So you mentioned Chaya was adopted a girl from Russia.
She was born in Russia.
Born in Russia, I'm sorry. She
came to America for medical treatment because of her preemie status, and that's when her biological mother realized that she just spent 10 hours on a flight with her, and this is not for her. And by God's incredible intervention, she called her Chabad rabbi in Moscow and said, I'm giving this baby up for adoption.
And she was born Jewish?
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't answer every question about that. I think some of that stuff is personal because some of my kids don't even know. Some of them are too young as far as the Jewish part.
Okay.
I'll talk more vaguely about, but Chaya was definitely born Jewish.
All right.
And she...
That gets a little complicated, right? Growing up, as they grow older, they have to choose Judaism for themselves, or they have to convert?
They do when they turn bar bat mitzvah 12 or 13. But choosing is not what some think it is, meaning they think that, oh my gosh, you have to sit down and have a crash course. These kids are growing up Jewish and they went through a conversion. So it's called Al Das Bezdin. The Jewish rabbinical tribunal approves it at a young age. When they turn bar bat mitzvah, you basically have to ask them if they're happy being a member of this family, the Jewish community. If they affirm that they are, that's considered their affirmation that they're part of Am Yisrael, part of the Jewish people. But Chaya was born Jewish, but the rabbi in Moscow was hesitant because he's like, sure, you after a 10-hour flight, but she was very young and he flew with his wife to New Jersey to make sure she knows what she's doing. And once he realized that she was really adamant about giving the baby to another family to raise, so he knew me and he called me. And that was the novelty, that he happened to know that I was looking for an adopted baby. No one knew. He happened to know because he's a friend of mine. And so God literally put the pieces of the puzzle together. And that day when I stood in Shrewsbury, New Jersey, it was a Tuesday. I think it was November 21st. I think so. It was in November of 2009. It was crazy how in a minute you go from being a saddened, internally broken person because God gave you something in your life that you think was wrong, right? I thought that God was really unkind to me. I thought, how could he dare do this to me? I'm living in Montana. We're driving 7 hours each way every month to use the mikveh, 14 hours round trip to go to Salt Lake City to use a mikveh. And us? This is who you give infertility to? I can give you a list in the world of people that probably could deserve that a little better. Right? And I don't mean that, I have a list. I'm just saying that us.
Why me?
Why? Not only why me, but I thought for heaven's sake, out of all people, we should be the ones to have those biological kids. As it turns out, God had a totally different plan, but for a good reason. He knew there was going to be these kids, and I only say that now because I see the fact. He knew there's going to be these kids that need a loving, embracing home, a family, a parents that will take them for who they are, but also deal with the challenges that come down the road. And that's something we didn't know when we started the adoption process, right? Now we're experts.
The idea of what the mental, all the
mostly emotional, the emotional issues that a adoptive child, as wonderful as you may be, the kids are not upset at you. They're not acting out because you're bad, right? As parents, we tend to take things personal, but it's not personal. It's kids going through whatever they're going through. And it's not just with adoptive kids, it's in general. Kids are expressing themselves in crazy ways because they're trying to get a message across. And either you're going to hear the message or you'll get offended and respond wrongly. And then the result it'll exacerbate the problem instead of dealing with it. So sure, kids are going to act out, especially if they have attachment issues. Deal with it, get the help for it and guide them properly. They're not out to get you. No kid is out to get their parents, but certainly not adoptive kids. They just want to make sure you never forget that they know that they're adopted and that they have another side to their life that you're not familiar with because it's internal. And it's a lot to take in. Listen, no parent likes knowing that their kid is struggling, but you have to deal with that reality and deal with it well.
Right. When's the right time to tell the children that they're adopted?
Day one. Don't ever hold back. From day one, you read them stories. There's Happy Adoption Day. You do whatever you got to do.
As early as possible.
As early as possible. There used to be an era where people would hide it.
Right.
It's catastrophic. What are you hiding from your kid? They'll find out when they're 18 that they're adopted. They'll want to kill you for keeping it a secret. What were you hiding?
Right.
Why are you hiding? Our kids ask questions. And I ask them sometimes, are you ever going to want to meet your biological family or your biological mom, biological dad? Some of them, know how to answer that. Some of them are not sure. There's definitely curiosity. Don't hide it from them. Because why? What's the goal?
Are you scared that you may lose them?
No. I think when you hide it, it's because you're scared you're going to lose them. I think if you're giving them an incredible upbringing, you're not going to lose them. Will there be moments where they'll do things with their biological parents that will sort of shake you at the core, like why they go? You have to remember it's part of who they are. And you can ignore that all you want and make believe it's not real. They're not out to get you, and it's just part of their story. And denying a child part of their story does not help you or them. Not in the short term, not in the long term. So we went from 2009, we adopted our first kid. And literally 4 months later, a Chabad rabbi called me and said, I don't know how to ask this, but there's a situation. That's how all the conversations start.
You already know that
Well, at that point, it was new. And he says, there's someone in my community and blah. He gives me the whole shebang.
Sure.
And so we said we would adopt the kid. And I never forget, and this is going to be, so we have a child, they're 13 months apart. The adoptions were even less than 13 months apart because Chaya we adopted at 2 months. So it was only 11 months later we adopted a second kid.
Wow, like Irish twins.
Exactly. So people, the Irish twins, and people say, oh, they look alike. And I crack up about that, because they don't know if they're adopted. It's interesting what you hear comes out of people's mouths.
That is hilarious. Oh, she looks like you.
Exactly. Oh, I get that all the time.
Really?
Well, there is some truth about the fact that adoptive kids, some of them end up looking like their adoptive parents, but you can Google that on your own.
That's fascinating.
But I think with my mother was still alive. It was before she passed away. And she said to me, basically said, are you out of your mind? What are you adopting another one? Like, it's adoption. It's not biological. There's no biblical. Yeah. And I said to her, I said, Ma, I thought you taught us that we don't believe in family planning. And she burst out laughing and she told everyone she was sick in the hospital. And she said to all the nurses, my son in Montana is crazy. He's using my words against me. He's using my education against me. But it's true in a sense that we had an opportunity. You asked me before if we're done at 5. I can't answer that because none of our 5 adoptions happened by us seeking the adoptions. It literally came into our plate. Mm-hmm. And so if God put something in our plate again, I would like to say that I would think about it, but I don't know that I would. If it's put in my plate like the other 5 have, I'd probably run with it. So 11 months later, we adopted Zizi. We had a 3-year break where, again, nothing came our way. Things came our way.
But let me ask you, like you said, nothing comes your way. But I feel like from my understanding, there's so many children out there who need adoption. Is there a proactive approach that you can take to if that's something that you want?
There could be a proactive approach, but the foster care system in our country is broken. And so just because you see a kid in foster care and you're dying to just take that kid home and give it an incredible life, the system doesn't always allow that, right? And so there's a lot of procedural stuff. There could be a relative involved that says, hey, I don't want, I don't want the kid to go to an adoptive family. I want a kid, so it becomes complicated. But we did have a break. But the reality is that we got calls about adoption and nothing panned out. And then 3 years later, I got a call from an activist in New York who said, there's a situation. It's always a situation.
Yeah.
And he said, would you be open to taking a Black or biracial kid?
Which will lead me to my next question.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna, which you're already touching on with Manny, your son. Adopting a Black child within.
It's funny because Manny is born to a Jewish mother.
Okay.
And I got the call and I was very unsure about it personally. Not because I'm scared, it wasn't a racial perspective. I was concerned about what that would be like for him growing up, in a mostly white family, but more importantly, in a mostly white community. And what kind of challenges am I giving this kid just by welcoming him into that community? And I have to give credit, as I try to always do, but Chavi was the one, in general with adoption, in general with that, thinking out of the box. Chavi's really ahead of the game. I always join her. I eventually get it, but it takes me time. I'm a slow learner. But she was like, of course, well, what's the issue? Because the kid's Black? So what? So we'll deal. There's going to be challenges in life. Deal with it. Don't leave a Jewish kid who needs a home at the side of the road just because it doesn't fit your particular narrative right now. And we were on board. And the reality is that I can't even imagine life without Manny. First of all, he's an incredible rapper. You should hear the way he copies Nis and Black. I guess it's natural, genetic. I can't explain any of that. I could never in the life of mine. I can copy a lot of singers.
He has flow. He has rhythm.
Flow and rhythm. And literally, one day he's going to be on a stage somewhere doing this.
All right. Watch out, Nis and Black.
He wants to be in the Vikings. He wants to be a football player, which is a possibility too, the Minnesota Vikings. But the reality is that he's his own kid, and he knows that he's Black. And he asks me about. We talk about the Black, white. He's not. He's also very smart. Now? He's 6.5. Wow. And he's very in tune to the reality. He asked me once, he once said to me sitting at the kitchen counter, he said, Abba, I wish I was white. Whoa. And I said, I wish I was Black. So he looks at me like, what are you talking about? So I right away took out my laptop and showed him some pictures. So he looks at a picture of Barack Obama. I showed him a picture of Barack Obama. He goes, he's not Black. Don't ask me what that means. Then he saw a picture of Colin Powell. He goes, he's not Black.
Okay.
Then I showed him a picture of Oprah. He goes, she's Black.
What?
So I don't know what he sees different than I do. Maybe it's just male versus female. I have no idea.
Right.
But we talk about it openly. My daughter Chaya was once in the bath years, and she said, if it wasn't for Martin Luther King, because it was Martin Luther King Day, if it wasn't Martin Luther King, many couldn't be part of our family. And that kind of observation, that reality.
That's a real awareness.
And I think that is a new thing for listen, there's always been Black Orthodox Jews, including in Crown Heights. There's some families that were always African, Black. But having one that's part of an entirely Caucasian family is a different component. And I think recognizing that, again, that's part of his journey. He's going to ask questions. He's going to have to deal with that reality. Some of it he'll deal with now, some of it he'll deal with later. But every kid has that. You know, our Shoshana, our daughter who we adopted when she was 12 in 2016, she came to our summer camp.
Wow.
She came to our summer camp. I never adopted a preteen. Who in their right mind would ever do that?
Right.
You know, we adopted babies.
And we imagine how much more trouble, how much more challenging
Sure,
that could
because
be.
she had 12 years of history and it wasn't very good history. But she came to our summer camp for 2 weeks and basically didn't want to leave. And so with the help of her grandmother, make a long story short, she wanted to be adopted by us. And that was the hardest one to answer, that call, because one thing we knew, that a 12-year-old, she's a preteen, and we're young parents. I mean, at the time I was 35 and Javi was, 30, 32, 31.
Yeah.
But the reality is that she's taken us on a whole different journey, a journey into the world of how do you deal with all that history and get yourself cleaned up in the sense of getting the rehabilitation people need. You know, we try to sweep things under the rug, but you can't. You got to deal with it. You got to get the mental health treatment. So we sent her into a wilderness program. She was in a wilderness, what they call a wilderness school, but it's an emergency program where you get the help you need. For 4 months, she lived out in the wilderness in Utah.
Wow.
And now she's in a therapeutic equine therapy school in Utah.
So even with you're adopting her, she's hardly even home now. She
lived at home for 2 years.
Okay.
And now we had to put her, we got her into a place that will give her the journey, allow her journey to flourish. She was just home for Hanukkah, which is incredible. But yeah, I mean, these are real hard things that parents need to do. And then a year after Shoshana, we adopted another baby. So we adopted 4 as babies, 1 as a 12-year-old. But that takes you on a whole. Listen, I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old daughter, and I'm 38 years old. This is not something I would have ever signed up for under normal circumstances. But God, as long as you allow God to do the planning, and you just play along, you're in much better shape.
Let God do the planning, and as you
Play
say,
along.
you do the parenting.
Because no matter how much we try to figure out we're going to outsmart God, we can't.
What I find amazing is that you, even through all the different challenges that you had through life, it never came to a point, for what it seems, that you said you stopped believing in God, but rather you just got upset at God, or you were angry at God.
Oh, I had moments where I was
always
angry. Absolutely. I never stopped believing in him because it's the easy way out, and it's only temporary. Because I feel bad for atheists all the time, because I mean, if you get upset, who are you going to be upset at? Really, it's terrible. I honestly pity them.
I guess,
yourself, the world, nature. Come on, I got to blame nature. There's only a limited amount I can blame on nature. So having that relationship with God, we've had our ups and downs. I had a friend that once said, he can't understand why God did this to Chaim when my mother died. He said, I can't understand. A year earlier, he finally got you on board because the miracle of Chaya's adoption. He says, now he just ruined it. He had the greatest marketing guy on God's team, on Team God, and now he messed it up. So, but I do, we have better days, but I definitely believe that internalization is where it's key. I don't know, without Hasidus, without the study of the depth of Hasidic philosophy, I don't know where I'd be today spiritually, but that has allowed me to realize that a relationship with God is not something that's just superficial, that comes and goes based on, God is not my ATM machine. Just because I showed up and said, God, give me X, Y, and Z, doesn't mean he has to. Right. He does it on his pace with what he thinks is right at the right time. And when it's the right time, it's like the sea splits right in front of you. And if it's not the right time, no matter how you could stand on your head, nothing's going to change. God's time and God's operation. Just let him do his thing.
What are your biggest fears for your children as they grow up and grow in this adoptive family, but also within the community? I feel like it's still very fresh, very new.
I don't know if it's a fear. I mean, I think every parent fears or is concerned about how the children will eventually, how they'll turn out, mostly as being ethical, moral, in my case, religious and observant Jews. But more than that, I would hope that what they get in our home, they'll walk away with a healthy identity and a comfortability with their personality, with who they are, and allow it to manifest itself however that goes. But they should be comfortable in their own skin. And I think that's something that I saw growing up, where we wanted everyone to be the same. Human beings are never the same. God didn't create human beings to be the same. With adoptive children, certainly not. And so the minute, I recognize that the results are out of my control, something that a great therapist, Brad Reedy, talks about a lot. He's a wilderness therapist, and it's out of my control. Let go of the outcomes. Let the outcomes happen on their own. Yeah. My wife, Chavi, and I, on her Instagram, she's very big. It's called, I think it's at Chavi Bruk.
At Chavi Bruk, okay.
ChavieBruk. She talks a lot about this stuff because we read these books, a lot of them together. We listen to the podcast together. letting go of outcomes and letting, in our world, letting God do the rest of the work. In the secular world, they don't use God but letting things pan out. But let Hashem do His thing. Do your best.
Let go of that control.
Let go of the control because you're not in control anyhow. They're going to do whatever they want to do at the end of the day. Let go of it and let things happen. Give your children the very best. And if you want them to be religious Chabad people, give it everything you've got. But stop thinking you can control the outcomes because you can't. Only God controls the outcomes. And living that way, even telling our kids things like, I'm proud of you. We don't do that anymore. Okay. I'm not proud of you. I hope you're proud of yourself. Wow. It's not about me.
Right.
The minute I say to a kid, I'm proud of you, it means I'm proud of you, meaning it's about me, not you.
Right.
So letting go of that, and it's not an easy thing for parents to do, but it's truly a very rewarding way to live, to have a wholesome house to the best of our ability. And then pray a lot. You got to pray a lot if you want your kids to turn out half decent. Pray.
Through this process, what's a big way that you've changed?
Well, I think all of it has changed me incredibly, and being more patient, more understanding, and really pausing and saying, the world doesn't always work. The world isn't always the way I see it. There's other perspectives. Even my children, I have to try to see that they have a way of seeing the world that I don't see, and try to sort of get myself into their shoes and try to see it from their perspective, especially as adoptive children. And I think if we did that more as a society, the world would look a lot better.
What do you have a message to your children? One day they'll be, the fans of Meir K. They'll listen to the podcast. What's something you want to tell them?
That they should know that the love is unconditional and there's nothing they can do to mess with that. I think they know that already, but they can, no matter what they do, the love will be there and the warm embrace will be there. And so they shouldn't try to act out, try to test if they're going to be loved, because the answer is always going to be the same. The love will always be there no matter what.
Wow. Beautiful. Powerful. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
You're a legend.
Now come to Montana. What are you doing in New York in this godforsaken place? Come to God's country.
Well, I got the invitation. And
That's
I
right.
would love to be there, and I'd love to meet the family, God willing, very soon.
You want to do a podcast? Do it with Manny, not with me.
All right. Coming for you, Manny. All the best. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
Have a safe trip back home.
Thank you.